and here's a crucial point, it's also rational to do this because the differences between groups are not so large that there isn't a substantial overlap between them for every trait we care about. And given that the variance between individuals will be much higher than the variance between groups, again, for any trait we care about, but especially what we're talking now about intelligence, it would actually be irrational to read much into group differences.
I emphatically agree with everything you've just said. As you pointed out, Nick and I have some of these passages in italics in the book. One of them we have not stressed enough is that there's much more variation within groups than there is between.
At what loci? Skin color certainly isn't it. You could survey the entire populations of Bantu and Sami people and you would find zero overlap in their skin tones. That's at least one major phenotypic difference where we're able to say conclusively there is no overlap at all between the examples given. Sure, you might argue that the genetic differences between different populations of Homo sapiens is on average very minor, but you won't be able to argue that skin color isn't something people care about. Simply looking at people's preferences when searching for a sexual partner is enough to demonstrate just how wrong such statements are, not to mention all the institutional discrimination against particular skin tones. Now, it's true, distinctions between different ethnicities aren't drawn based on differences in just a single trait. Both sub-Saharan Africans and Japanese have black hair, for example, but you won't be able to find a single Japanese person with naturally curvy hair. But all this means is that while we may see some overlap between different groups in single traits, the aggregate differences are massive. Instead of just repeating what Ryan Falk has already had to say on this, I'll let the man make the point himself.
The reason this is dumb is because this argument is based on the people who make this, who are, PhDs and doctorates and professors at universities, that they're not taking into account cumulative probability, right? These masters of their craft, masters of their field, people who are, put in positions of authority and power and teaching of hundreds of people, they are ignorant of a basic concept known as cumulative probability. What that FST distance means is that at any given gene location, 15% of the variance is within population, 85% is between the populations. So you're more likely to share an allele with a white guy than a black guy 57.5% of the time on average at any one gene location. But there are roughly 23,000 genes. So using 100 genes, the probability that you will be more similar to the white person, to a random white person, than to a random black person on 51 of those genes is around 92%. If you use 200 genes, the odds that you will be more similar to the white person than the black person on 101 genes, right, just getting over 50%, the odds of that, of being closer to the white person, is 98%. By 1,000 genes, it's basically 100%. This is done with simple binomial probability calculation.
The idea that we're more alike than we're different is something I keep hearing otherwise intelligent people say, often with the attempt, poorly, to argue that we should not distinguish between people based on origin. Unfortunately, this is an incredibly lazy and weak line of argumentation. That different populations have more in common than what sets them apart could just as well be said of dogs. Let me put this question to you. If you're the parent of a young child and you're planning to relocate, and when shown a property, the realtor mentions that the next door neighbor keeps several pit bulls, would that give you pause? Would you reconsider moving into a house if you knew that on the other side of a 3-foot fence there live dogs that are responsible for 65% of all dog bite fatalities, despite only making up 11% of the dog population? Why? Are you prejudiced against certain dogs? What if they're corgis, Pomeranians, or pugs? Would you react differently? What if we're talking about wolves? What difference does it make what breed of dog they are? They're more alike than they're different, aren't they? Are you really going to let your bigotry stop your child from playing outside in the sprinkler? Who are you to judge these dogs as individuals when you haven't even met them? Why don't we take this one step further, and instead of comparing different breeds of Canis lupus, why not look at dogs and humans? I'm pretty sure that if you ask anyone who owns a dog if they have more in common with their pet than there is that sets them apart, most will tell you that the former is true. Is that wrong? Are you going to be the asshole that tells them a cherished member of their family doesn't have enough in common with them to be considered more alike than different? Humans and dogs are, after all, both bilaterally symmetrical omnivorous mammals that live in social groups and express emotional needs that are satisfied through the relationships within their family unit. It's hardly any surprise that canines are utterly dominant as the most popular fursona species. Dogs and humans do, after all, have a lot in common. But does that mean these deviants don't belong in jail when they sexually abuse animals? Of course not. There is no escaping the fact that there still are significant differences between humans and dogs, never mind the fact that most dogs don't even live to achieve the ripe old age of consent. And that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? Two things being more alike than different is completely fucking irrelevant. What should be of consideration is whether or not there exist appreciable differences that form the grounds for the drawing of meaningful distinctions. And since we're already comparing things, why not apples and oranges? They are both domesticated, edible, popular stone fruits produced by angiosperm trees grown in orchards. Apples can be either sweet or sour. Citrus fruits can be either sweet or sour. Apples come in many different colors: red, orange, yellow, or green. Citrus fruits come in many different colors: red, orange, yellow, or green. So what's different about them? One has slightly knobbly skin that isn't all that pleasant to chew on. The juice of the other can be fermented to produce an alcoholic beverage. Are these differences all that huge? How about this? One has 9 chromosomes, while the other has 17. Now you wouldn't be able to see that from simply looking at either fruit, but that's a pretty big difference right there, isn't it? And the DNA coded in these chromosomes, it's not the same thing, is it? Perhaps that's why apples and oranges don't taste nearly the same, and why they have become the classical example of why you shouldn't draw direct comparisons between things of different nature just because they appear superficially similar. The reason we don't treat apples and oranges the same is due to the content of their character. Now please, stop insisting things have more in common than what sets them apart. It's a lazy, cowardly line of reasoning that avoids anything that might be a substantive argument. It is intellectual dishonesty at its finest. As for the matter whether or not you should draw distinctions between groups based on their origin, ask yourself this: do you want to be the idiot who leaves their daughter to the wolves?